yeah, anytime.
First of all, I want to welcome Greg for coming in today. Well and septic training, that's something that we really don't talk about much, but you have a basic class on it one time. You're going to learn a large amount about well and septic. First of all, before we even begin, I know Greg has a nice presentation, but at the end, does anybody have any real questions about well and septic right off the bat? Maybe if we have one or two questions, you could kind of dwell on those questions. Is there anything that somebody wants to come out of here and go, you know what, I was, laying up last night going, well, in septic training, here's the questions I want to ask. That's real common.
You never know.
Well, there's definitely different types of septic systems, right?
Yes, right.
So I have the basic understanding, because I've been in the business long enough to know that there are different systems, but I guess I would like to know how you determine what it is.
Excellent.
Especially when it's an elderly client that maybe the husband's no longer living and she doesn't know. And then I wonder, when you have the inspection, I understand sometimes when they talk about the baffles and all that business, and I want to know specifically, I've had a problem where they can't see through it, and then they got to dig to get to the right.
Okay.
So I just
so
I want to know the differences between the two and why sometimes they can see it and sometimes they can't, and why sometimes they have to have a load test. And why sometimes they don't, call for it. And I understand why they don't call for it, but what pushes it over the edge?
Right.
You have to have it.
Why a load test?
Right.
And then basically you're saying, hey, what are the basic defects? What are the basic defects that you're going to run into?
Does it just need to be pumped? Is it the pump itself that's not right, or is it if it's naturally it's not naturally, but you know what I mean? If it's what is it called? Ground? What is it? If it's fed.
It's gravity.
Gravity fed.
Yeah, it's gravity fed.
So is it all? Are they all gravity fed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's very few. There's a few that have mechanical pumping systems, but it's in really super rare cases.
And they all have baffles then?
Yeah, there's always a baffle. And we actually have a couple of slides and pictures of them, so you can kind of get a visual of what that looks like.
When it's a baffle.
Right. And then, is there it has to be so many feet, if it fails and there needs to be a new system, it has to be 15 feet away or something?
Right, and the distance, yeah, exactly, we cover that as well. Yep, got a slide on that as well. Distance.
What about any distribution box?
Distribution box.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else? Good question.
Why would anybody want to do that job?
Why would anybody want to do that?
Who wants to do that job? I got a couple of stories on that. They're just wow. So yeah.
Greg, I'm going to turn it right over to you. You're a specialist in this. All yours, my friend.
So let me take the most important question that is, why would anybody want to do that? All right. I don't do it. All right. I'm just saying, I don't do it. It was actually really, really cool. So just a quick introduction. I'm Greg DuPey. I own Pillar to Post Home Inspectors. We're based in Bucks County, Montgomery County, but we cover, we got an inspection tomorrow in Reading because our realtor sold a house there, and it's yep. We love you, you love us, we're going to Reading for you, we'll go to wherever, so for the right situation, we'll do whatever we need to. So we have 6 inspectors in the area and been in business for the company Pillar to Post 25 years, so a long time, been around doing this for a long time. So, commercial's over, that's the end of the commercial, now we'll move on to the show.
Are you a franchise?
We are, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're a franchise system, we have nationwide and in North America basically, we have 500 some odd franchisees across the country.
So if I'm doing something in Philadelphia, there's a Pillar to Post probably close to there that you use, or you go to Philadelphia?
We go to Philadelphia.
Oh, okay,
yep,
so you don't have territories, right?
Yeah, we have territories, but they're based on where we can do this at. I can't go to Philadelphia and teach classes, but I can do it in Bucks, Montgomery, Chester, and Delaware counties. So there's a few offices that I have to choose from. This is one of my faves. So, I've been doing classes in here for a lot of years. So, yeah. So, but yeah, it's funny. We did do septic inspections when I bought the business 7 years ago. Seems like a week. 7 years ago, and we wanted to really offer that. And one of the things that I know talking to realtors about early on was, you want everything. You want to be able to offer the client one stop. You don't want to arrange a term. When you sell a house, you don't want to arrange for a termite guy a pest control person, you name it, radon person. You just want to call these people and they will take care of everything. So rather than go and get PSMA approved as a supplier or as a test inspection company, we decided to kind of outsource that and thought, well, let's start with that, see how it works, and if we don't have someone out there that can deliver the same experience that we deliver, because it's all about, in our world, it's all about delivering a customer and a client and a realtor experience, that if we don't have that, then we'll get a guy, we'll teach him, it won't be me, and we'll teach him, and we'll do septic inspections, no problem. But it's a little cumbersome to do when you have a home inspection to have the same person on site. It really adds too much time to the home inspection, so you end up having two people come out anyway. So I'm getting to the point of why does anybody want to do this, which was the unmarked question down there. The unanswered question is really interviewing and going out and working with a dozen or so different companies and watching what they do and how they do it. What an experience. I didn't know from Septic. Okay, this was a new world for me, and Septic was a new world, and I never owned a house with a septic system. So being where you guys are coming from right now, where, wow, what about this whole thing? It was really helpful for me to go out and go on a septic inspection. So I would recommend, if you ever have a chance, to go on one. And then also, in my experience, the people who do it, there's a varying degrees, just like anything. There's the super professional, and there's the, hi, I'm Joe, and I'm like, I'm not shaking that guy's hand. All right, I'm just not shaking his hand. But the company we settled with and went with, and have stayed with now for 6 years, is Frank Environmental. They don't look exactly like this, but they show up in a lettered truck, and everything's clean and neat. They're professional. So yes.
So a question for you, on well and septic, the only reason, true or false statement, the only reason that anybody would have well and septic is because they're not connected to the township, water, and
Yes.
everything like that.
Right. Yep.
True, right?
True, absolutely. So, and the further out you get in the country, you'll find the more and more of that. So, and this course we talked about well septic, and I added propane was a question because that's kind of a kind of a country mouse thing. So it happens that works that way. So, oh wait, I'm on my computer. Let's try this one. There we go. So, and there's, I teach this course for certified, as a certified teacher to teach CE classes for realtors. So every 2 years you have to get your renewal. So if you sat through this, I don't know if you sit through, no, okay. I don't know if anybody's seen this. Okay, I cut it down a bit to make it a little bit simpler, and it's actually supposed to be a 2.5 hour just on septic and wells. So for CE credits, there's a lot of fluff in there, and a lot of it takes on conversation anyway. So, but these are basically city water treatment. So it's better to start there and say, okay, so what's city water treatment? I promise I won't read slides to you either. I don't read slides, so but I'll talk about it. Basically, in a city water system, in a public system, you've got the whole concept is filtration of wastewater. So in a city, all the wastewater from all the houses goes into a huge treatment facility. It goes through a filtration process, and a lot of that filtration process, interestingly, uses earth. Okay, it uses dirt and earth and clay. Sounds like history. Clay, and so it basically filters through the dirt and then comes in earth, and earth, what do they call it? Diatomaceous earth. And then it's set back into the system as drinking water. So it's basically this circular system that runs only on a massive scale. So you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of houses and properties that are actually draining into this system. Well, it's not too different. So that's how the city water works. And here's just a schematic of it. And then this is basically removal of the sludge, decomposition, treated water comes out the other end and into the usable potable water. So the rural system, you know what? Interestingly, it's the same. I know people are like, wait a minute, it's not the same. Well, the concept is the same. You're basically filtering the water through the earth, and then it's going back into groundwater. Now, it's not going back into your well. Okay, it's not that good of a circle, but it's going through and back into groundwater, which eventually ends up probably in a well or back into the earth's water, so into the water table. So it's really interesting that they're really the same system. So when, and I try to relate this to your world, when you're relating to a client who's never had septic, and they're like, oh man, I don't want septic. I don't know. It's like, wait a minute, no, relax. Breathe out, take a deep breath. It's okay. It's okay, because this is really a very similar system to what you had in the city or in the suburbs. It's just not as large scale, and it's on you, so we have to take special attention to it. But it's it's really that. So it's an on-site system, basically same process as city water. There's three sections of it, so this kind of answers a little bit of the types of systems. But there's basically three components to any of these systems. The only missing part you'll find is a leach field. Will not be present in an old, very, very, very old system. That's just rock, and all it is a pit. And that kind of a pit is rare to find. Not very common anymore. Most of them have been replaced because they were installed back in the 1800s and early 1900s, and they've been replaced with the septic system by now. But septic tank, basically that's the tank. Some schematics here to kind of bring it to life. But imagine that the wastewater flows out of the house, just like it would in a public system, right? And it goes into this big box, okay? And that's basically the settlement tank. So that's the basic first step for where that material goes. So all of the wastewater, everything that comes down the drain goes into that. We'll talk about a little bit about what should and shouldn't go down the drain in your septic system. It's a little bit different with that. So as you're educating your clients about, well, what's different about a septic system? Well, there's some basic things. One is you got to be careful of what you put down there. You can't just shove anything down like you do in your city system. And then the second thing is you just have to be cognizant of some of the maintenance for it. Some things that have to be maintained. So these are the things you don't want: solids, grease, cigarette butts, all sorts of stuff like that. And where you have, I think there's a slide on it, but where you have garbage disposer, you definitely don't want to have that in your home. And there are companies out there that say we have a septic safe garbage disposer. Nah, I'd pass. Just that's okay. Compost is good. Composting is good. So just don't put it down the garbage disposer if you've got a septic system. And once you get used to it, it's not that hard. I lived in Jersey for a while, and you couldn't have a garbage disposer. And it's like, what? Seriously? You can't have a garbage disposal? And so it worked out great, and was able to use it. So here's the anatomy of the system, and kind of how that main tank works. So you've got kind of three layers in the system, and we'll talk about during an inspection how they actually see what's going on in that tank. And you've got solids at the bottom, liquid, effluent they call it, in the center, and then soap scum. So we check out baffle. This is the baffle. Now this is way out of scale, okay? But this is the baffle. The baffle's purpose is so that when wastewater or sewage, what I call it wastewater, comes in from the house, it's basically going to fall down through here, and you have a level here that's obviously going to flow out through here. And the reason for the top part of this T, in this case, is to keep that scum from coming into the leach field. And there is scum. That's the only probably word to use.
Is there only those two baffles in the box, or is there something else that takes it from the box to the leach field that they have to see?
That's it.
That's it.
That's it. So you literally, when they inspect this, they will take this cap off.
Yeah, and they stick that.
And they have the stick with the camera. Have you guys, anybody seen that in process? Yeah. Okay, so you've seen it. And those who haven't, encourage you to go on an inspection. It's not as bad as you think, and it's very educational. So it isn't. First time I went, I was like, okay, I'll look, and it's like, whoa, what's all that bubbles and stuff? I was expecting the worst, and it's not. So surprisingly, it smells funny though.
but that's a different story. So, and you take the lid out, it's gonna be that way. So basically, yeah, it flows up here, and so as this water flows up through this baffle, it'll flow out into a leach field. So, and then it goes out into the leach field through the tank, and then it goes through this leach field. So imagine, if you will, pipes with holes in them, okay? And these holes in there, and those pipes are set into gravel, and then there's layers of gravel around it, and then there's earth on top of it. So you've got basically a way for that wastewater, because it's all water, it's not solids, it's not scum, it should be, if everything in the first part, if everything's working fine here, and we'll talk about defects that happen when they look inside, what they can see. But if everything's working fine here, then this should be working like this, and all the water's going back down into the groundwater. So, and being filtered by the earth. So it's the best filtration system out there, and actually the natural filtration system. So, and so that's basically the way that works.
Can I ask another question?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
So I know some clients ask if they should pump the system prior to having it inspected. And I've heard like two things. Well, I've experienced two things where sometimes it's been pumped and then they can't. If they don't pump it, they can't see. If they pump it, there's not enough in there to test the baffles or to test if it's empty. There's not enough to see if it's draining correctly.
That's a good question. So that's actually kind of goes back to this picture. Is if a house has been vacant for some time, this water level will naturally drop, okay? And if the water is dropped, then what's going out to the leach field is going to be minimal, and they can't actually test the leach field. And they test the leach field by using a probe to see the T-stick, to see if there's moisture, wetness all around. So around each of the legs or the fields, each of the fields of the leach field, whether it's 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it is. And so if they have to do that, to the point, I think somebody had a question about load tests. Why do we have to have a hydraulic, they call it hydraulic load test, but basically just dumping water in the system.
Right.
So they have to have that because if the water level drops. Now, if the house is occupied, got 5 people living in the house, and they have the system pumped, they're only going to pump off the solids from under here. As long as they have a week or so to recover, flushing toilets and everything, you're going to be fine. Yeah.
So the load tests, this just happened with my brother-in-law, who lives in Delaware County. There were 3 of them living in the house, and they had to have a load test done. And I just thought that was odd. They had to have a load test when there's 3 people living in the house. So then, like, my concern was, well, then you're taxing the system.
Well, not necessarily taxing it.
And do they traditionally like pump it and then do a load test?
No. Well, yeah, they actually no, they won't pump it. So they'll just do a load test.
They just do a load test.
Yeah.
They add more water to it.
Yeah, and they'll run a hose into the system.
Yeah.
That's
well,
basically
sometimes they have to look.
If they, exactly. If there's no on-site water, or if there's an issue with it being a well, and we've had it where we've run the well water, and actually the well water
runs right.
and it runs the well dry.
Right.
And no, it doesn't necessarily run it dry permanently, but it has to recoup. So it's a challenge if it's a well, but you can bring in water. So
How much does the test cost?
For
Septic.
$390.
$390.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's really close, if not exact. I'm sorry, I don't quote these prices every day, thankfully. Yes?
If I have, go ahead. Go ahead.
Either way.
If I have a client and they have these questions and about our septic and so forth, and we're using you on a regular basis and so forth as our expert per se, can we call you with these questions and I won't have to get into leach fields with them?
Absolutely. If you have a client in any element, let me explain that to you.
And I did have a few of these.
Right.
Some were bad and one was phenomenal, but I didn't get into the technical part of it.
Right.
And I had someone I was working with that did answer those questions for me. Like you need someone to say, hey, does this need to be pumped?
Yeah, and that's, I love doing that. That's one of the favorite parts of my work is that getting someone who calls, that maybe an agent that we works with us a lot, says, hey, can you talk to them about fill in the blank? And it's like, talk them off, in a way, talk them off the ledge, or make sure they don't go to that ledge, and just kind of get them through that, it's okay, and answer all their questions. So, yeah, that's.
They might love the house, but they might be scared of this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And generally, the septic people we use, Frank, there's about 3 inspectors that do our work, and they are all like us. I've heard them live and in person, and it's important to have that, Billy Bob, and that's not actually somebody's name, that's out there. Yeah,
Is there like an age to the system?
Actually, I've got a slide on that in here, but
Okay.
it depends on the system, but 30 to 40 years.
Right.
Generally speaking, leach field the same way. Septic, as far as, because it's an important thing, there's my invention, I call it the holy crap meter. And in a real estate transaction, there's like a point of holy crap. When you hear about, water heater's $1,000, roof is maybe $5,000, $7,000, $8,000.
Septic system takes you over the edge.
Yeah, and the only thing past that is maybe stuff,
Yeah.
which is a whole different issue, so.
So what
Yes.
happens when, you've got the old in-ground systems, they go bad, right, for whatever reason, and then what's the purpose of the new, of the sand man?
Oh, okay, yeah, that's good, okay, so in the leach field, yeah, that's a great question, because that's actually not addressed in this presentation, so. So the sand mound, I'll use this right here, there it is. So the sand mound is something that, if you've got a leach field, I'm trying to draw this here. So you've got the main line coming out of the house, you're going into the drop box or the septic tank, and then you're coming out of the leach field. And then, so it's gonna go out, and say this is just looking straight at it, there may be 4 or 5 lines that it splits to, but just looking straight at it, a cutaway, it's going to come out here, and this is going to be your leach field. So if this leach field gets clogged, filled, because maybe a baffle was broken off for a long period of time and nobody noticed it, or if something was wrong where this just filled up, or just over time, dirt, stuff gets in those holes and they clog, and it's no longer doing what it should do. So all the water's coming out here, it's not capped at the end, so you'll have a big old
Green spot.
yeah. Or if another Billy Bob has driven his pickup truck, I've seen this before, worn a path all the way back and forth to the 3-car garage, but in the back of the yard, and he's worn a path over that leach field. That's not good. That's eventually just going to tamp that down and basically make it toast. So sand mound. So the idea with the sand mound is they would take this out. Okay, it's okay. We got to take this out, but we're limited on space. Maybe they built another house right here at some point, and they could do that, but they're limited on space. So rather than move that house, can't do that. What are we going to do? They actually will go up and they'll actually build a hill. So you'll see some houses in the country, you've got this hill out in the backyard or the front yard or whatever, that's a sand mound. So they basically build this up so it's going to flow and actually go up. So in some cases now it needs to be at the right plane for it to fill and to go in here. And then that's where occasionally there'll be a pump system in here. Rarely, but there'll be a pump system in here that'll actually pump it up and into the sand mound. So, and that works as well. So does that answer your question on the sand mounds? Sort of. What's the other?
I guess I don't quite understand. I mean, I just left the house and had the, coming out of the house in the box, and the big round thing,
Yeah.
and then shortly past that was the sand mound, but the sand mound was way higher than the.
Right. There would have been some kind of a pumping system, had to have been. a
So it
pumping
pumps it
system,
up, and that's the
and it
point of it.
pushes it up
And then
into the
that's
mound.
it draining down.
And then it drains down through that sand mound, which is a gravel sand mixture in
It just takes
layers.
the place of the
It
flat.
takes place, yeah, it
flat
takes place to the flat, so then there would be an inline pump of some kind in that pipe that's going out to the sand mound or to the leach field, which happens to be in sand and built up this.
What would be the life expectancy for the pump into the sand mound?
Pump, as long as it's, and the pump is best if it's kept running, could be 20 years, 15 to 20 years. Part of your, system would have most likely a check that says that if it turns off for some reason, there'll be an alarm that it's actually shut off. So, yeah, you definitely have a way of knowing that that pump was shut down, wasn't working. So, 'cause that's important, because if it's not pushing it out, it'll be trouble in River City.
And a low profile sand mound is just that it's not as high.
Exactly.
There's no other difference. Is
That's
it-
no other difference.
No, just
Unless they've
high.
dug down, and then they've dug down and dug it out, and
Okay.
puts them in, so,
Okay.
yeah, full of that, so.
Did you ever have to replace the sand mound for any purpose?
Sir?
Is the sand mound, does that ever have to be replaced?
Yeah, well, in that case, it's above ground. They basically could dig up, it's not the mound itself, but the piping that's within it. So they would dig up the piping, pull it up, replace the piping, and then be back in business. So, because what happens is if they are testing in a leach field with the T-TAT, or to check the moisture level, if they don't find moisture on the surface and at a certain depth, then that's telling them that it's actually not leaching, it's actually not coming out of the pipes. The holes are clogged, or there's something going on inside those pipes. Whatever the case, the pipes need to come up and most likely just be replaced. PVC is pretty cheap, we usually use PVC.
Some of them, you see the pipes from the top of the mound. You see white pipes on the top of the mound, others that you don't.
Yeah, the ones on the top, I don't see that very good. I'm familiar with that, actually, yeah. Yes.
All good theoretical knowledge with a lot of stuff, but really at the end of the day, when you see problems, when we schedule an inspection and we see problems, what are the most common problems that we see with the septic system?
Yeah, the biggest problem is gonna be, right here, broken baffles. Okay, and actually there's some pictures of these coming up right here, so, that's kind of just a picture of what we talked about, so we've got grass, soil, gravel. So, let me, because there's
How do they
some
break?
really,
Just any real reason why they break?
no, just over time.
Just over time?
They just break, yeah. And pressure, water pressure against them, against the bottom will actually break off. That's one of the most common things. But these are the things that, why you've got to pump your tank. And pumping your tank does anybody have a septic system now? No, okay. So pumping the tank is based on how many people are living in the house and how, and how big the tank is. And your septic company will tell you that at the time of the inspection or when they come out. And it's every 2 years, every 3 years. I hear people every 5 years. Well, it's 2 people living in a house with a 1,000-gallon tank. You're not going to get a lot of, and even like, who was it that said that you mentioned the house that they didn't have the, so that they're going to have that, where.
Does that Ridex work at all? All those commercials you see pouring Ridex, does that really make any difference,
No,
or is that just
I
pure
would-
marketing?
No, that's pure marketing. That's pure marketing. Have it mechanically pumped. Does the right work, and while they're pumping it, you can say, hey, can you just take a look with your mirror and check and make sure the baffles are okay, and they can do that. So, so it depends on the size of the tank, how many people are living in the house, kind of like what we talked about. Small tank's a 500-gallon tank, usually too small. A lot of times you'll have a 30, 40, 50-year-old house that'll have too small of a tank because they've expanded the house. It started off as a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 1,500 square foot house, and they just bumped out walls and added rooms, and now it's 3,000 square feet and 7 people living there in a 500-gallon tank. So that could be part of the reason the system might fail, is that the tank is too small. Now that's gonna long shot, but if they've actually built out the house to a lot more square footage, you're gonna have an issue with the tank being too small. And so if you say, well, we've got 7 people or 8 people moving in, and there's a 5-gallon or 500-gallon tank, it'll probably be called out in the inspection as a defect, and won't pass. There's very few pass fails in the inspection process. Septic is one of them, it's pass or fail. So,
And then the big tank right here, pumped every 6 years for 2 people, and these are rough numbers. Pardon that noise, it's not supposed to be there. Garbage disposal isn't ideal, we talked about all those things. And those are things you shouldn't flush down the toilet, or down the anything. Chemicals, certainly cigarette butts, coffee grounds, anything like that, that can hold up in it. So as you're counseling people on how they should handle their septic system, those are the things you should put down. Yes.
So not their medication, home medication either?
Absolutely, yeah, I wouldn't, because you're going back in the groundwater. That's the same for public water as well. Just not a good idea to put that down there, so. And then, obviously, things that you shouldn't do. So if you have a septic system, a house that you're selling or buyers with a septic system, and you say, well, where's the system? Oh, it's right out back, right there. And there's, trees. How long, when did you plant those trees? Oh, little Bobby was 7 and he's 35 now, and that's problematic. It could be a challenge. So you need to just, now, would you say anything about it? No, that's not your job, but it's a good thing to file away in your mind as you're going into the process. Anticipation of challenges of the road, speed bumps that might hit you. So, yes.
I was doing an open house yesterday and the people wanted to know where the septic was, and there was no sand mound. So they did have a pipe coming up. I thought maybe that was the well water.
Yeah, that's probably the well.
So where's this, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how long have people lived in the house?
Since 1990, whatever.
Okay. It may be covered. So there's a cover for the actual tank. And your septic inspector needs to bring a shovel. And he has to usually dig down and find it. And they use all manner of stuff, sometimes a metal detector to catch, because there's metal handles on them. But sometimes they're buried. And the sellers may know where they are. If they don't know where they are and they've been in there since 1990, when was the last time you had it? Would be a good question. And I don't know on seller's disclosures what you guys have as far as septic goes, if it's how deep it goes. But I don't think it goes too deep. So no. Yeah. So
does it have to be X amount away from the house?
Yeah, it's actually it's coming up here. I think it's a certain number of feet away from the house. So why would you want to replace it? Usually it's obsolete. It's an old stone sewage system, or it's just not the right size. And then you've got damage tank itself. That's actually one of the reasons you want to replace it is it's cracked and or it's deteriorated. Yes.
How much does it, so let's say that's a situation where they need to replace it, what does that cost? Like breathing go from small to large?
Yeah, say if you're going to from 500 to 1,000 gallons, it's going to be between, depending on the whole situation, $5,000 to $10,000. And then the leach field is where it really gets expensive because you're dealing with a lot more ground there and a lot more, bringing in gravel and everything else. Usually taking out the old tank, you can extract it pretty easily. New one comes in. I've got a picture of a new tank. Comes in and it's a single piece. Good.
No, I was just saying it could be like the new system can be $35,000.
Oh yeah.
And more.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, it can range. The tank itself, it's really a simple job. $5,000 to $7,000 to $10,000. But if they have to replace the leach field and everything else,
You see situations where maybe if the home was built, say 1990, and they had a septic, and then at some point public water and sewer became available, do they have that option then to connect to that?
Absolutely,
and then just let that kind of.
Yeah, they can. There's a process in each. Some townships have different codes and laws on this. Some don't care, and so you have to research that and make sure that okay, we've got public water and sewer. Just need to hook up to it. Just meaning, what's that? Just cost? Yeah, it might be just
as
what?
expensive, right?
Yeah, forget it. Yeah. Have you had that experience before or seen that? No, it's same thing with hooking up gas. We can hook up the gas line. It runs right down the street. Really, $10,000 later because they got to go underneath the driveway and it's like crazy. So yeah.
I had a situation not too very long ago where the house was not that old. It's a 4-bedroom house and septic was built for a 3-bedroom house.
Right.
Well, once we were under contract, okay, buyer found out, they didn't want the house anymore. Through many negotiations, we lost the transaction.
Right.
And the seller got all bent out of shape because he didn't want to spend the money and this and everything. So, anyway, long story short, I lost the listing. And I told him he was gonna have to disclose it.
Yeah.
I lost the listing, he went with another company. They found the buyer, had it inspected, and that inspection got passed.
How about that? And nobody did any work on it between?
So they bought four-bedroom house with a three-bedroom system. They never disclosed it.
How about that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the old, well, we found fill in the blank that was really big in the inspection, and whether it's moved in the attic or whatever, and then they never go on and disclose it. And just see what the next buyer says, you know, it's like, okay. Sorry, yeah, it's tough. And that goes back to the, there's an ethics class. Gotta disclose that stuff, so, and that's why the seller's disclosure, people say, well, I gave you the seller's disclosure, it should be, you know, it's like, just double check it, you know, we're just gonna look at everything, make sure it's in there.
This is basically the soil can't absorb the effluent water anymore. You got stuff going on, grease, oil, it's just clogged,
Or the field is clogged. And over time, all the gravel, dirt will penetrate into the gravel, and now you've got really just a massive dirt gravel mess all around it. That's just over time. Or you've got tear marks.
And it is illegal to have the washer and dryer not go into that, right?
Correct, yeah. Exactly, so here's a new tank installation, and you can see there should be another hole there for the baffle. I don't remember when I showed this picture, but that's your hole for your baffle. So you can see it's quite high. It's quite high in the system. Here's looking at a brand new tank that's just been installed, and here's the T end of the baffle. So the center of this would basically be going out into the house, actually, in this case. And then here's the opening. So where they can put the camera down, take pictures, and see what's going on. And then here's a view from the top. Not exactly what you think. With the cover off. And then there's the top of the baffle, so it looks fine. It's doing everything it should do and working. And then here's just a view from inside the tank. So exactly what you'll see in a report that this is all in good shape and okay. A couple of pictures. Here's a lot of grease and scum and stuff in there, but the baffle's doing its job. It's working okay. But if somehow this material ends up going up over this top level, then that's where you run into trouble. And there's no way to know, unless you, on a regular basis, have your system checked. And it's
That comes out when they pump, right?
yeah, that comes out when they pump. And then here's some issues. You got two issues going on here. Roots will penetrate the tank. So, and they'll come in because the tank is sealed from the top with a cover, and that cover isn't necessarily sealed. So those roots are going to make their way into the tank. And over time, and if you've got a tree planted very close by, the tree is going to encroach on the tank and actually break the sides of the tank wall. It can be pretty tough. And oh, by the way, the roots are going for the water because they're thirsty. They'll find that's the best place to get water all year round. So they don't have to wait for rain. So they'll find their way into that system, similar to a main sewer line where you're on water or on public sewer. If you plant a tree over the main waste line going out to the street, those roots are going to find their way into that system, one way or another. Even if it's PVC, they will find a way to get in there. So it's real. Here's a missing baffle. So this is a great shot of just what's going on, and the water here is pretty low, so you can't really see. But that's generally what they'll find is that baffle's either missing or broken or both.
And I said, if during an inspection a baffle is missing, does that cause for concern to go further and deeper into the leach field? Does that like pose red flags?
Well, as for the inspector, yes. He'll look at the tank first.
Right.
If he sees a missing baffle, he's going to, if he sees a missing baffle, he's gonna like, okay, let's see how this field is. But he'll check it the same anyway. But they'll, it's one of those red flags that goes off in your head that, okay, well, I want to really make sure that this is okay. Similar to anything where you see water in a basement, moisture in a basement, you're looking for mold. Because where there's water, there's mold. Same thing with this. You're really on the lookout for it. Not that you wouldn't be anyway, but this is the part in my first inspection that I was blown away with. So you're at McDonald's, or hopefully not McDonald's. I went through there yesterday. Is that bad food? I'm sorry. My kids, I had to take them to the airport. They're like, we just got to get some breakfast. They just, they were had a quick run. Just did a drive-through, and I was starving. I'm like, okay, give me a whatever. And it was just,
You feel so thirsty.
It was like a biscuit, and it like took all the moisture out of my mouth. It was gone. I'm like, I did my dog with us, and I gave it to him, and I don't think he was too happy with it. But yeah, it's just like he ate it, Anyway, so you're at McDonald's, and you've got the straw, right? And you got the straw in your Coke, okay? And you put your thumb on the lid at the top of the straw, and you pull up the, physics here. You've got the liquid that's inside the soda. Very similar situation with this, where they have this giant straw that has a mechanical thumb for the top, and they basically put it down in the pit all the way to the bottom, okay? And then they plug the top up and then lift it up, and what you're seeing is basically a core sample, of what's in that tank. It's like, wow, what a great idea. I know how much of each of the stuff is in there. When I saw mine, I don't have a picture of one here, but I saw some of mine. It's like they had this much scum, they had this much actually very clear water, surprisingly. And it's a clear tube, and then of course there was stuff at the bottom. But it was really interesting. So that actually can tell you how much solids are in the bottom of the tank. When was it last pumped? Depending on how many people are living in the house, you can get an idea. Sometimes the septic inspectors will tell you this. Sometimes you'll be amazed at how much solids there is in the bottom of the tank. Boy, they haven't pumped this in a long time. Or they got 20 people living in the house, one or the other. So it needs to be pumped, and they'll put that in the report. But from a pass-fail standpoint, if the baffle's broken and there's scum on the top, then that's going to be a fail. It'll fall in the fail. Oh, by the way, it's not going to be, it's failed because it'll tell you exactly why it's failed. And from that standpoint, what needs to be done. And depending on the company, some companies do repairs, some companies don't. And so, but there's facts to back up what they're telling you. So, the one guy I was with, actually from Frank, he was a pretty good sized fella, and there was a problem with the baffle. I said, so what do you do? I mean, who goes down there? He said, well, not me. He was bigger around than the hole. And he said, we got a little skinny guy that goes down in there, and we pump the tank out, and that's his job. Just go down and it's like, there you go. I hope so. Bless his heart. Man. So anyhow, here's just basically an old seepage pit. Cesspool, they call them, or whatever. Lots of names for them. Not in use anymore. Really effective system, actually, because over time the mortar that they did put between the stones breaks apart, and as mortar does over time, especially when there's water around, it'll break apart, and the water leaches out through that. So, but there's pumping and all sorts of issues. So you really go into a more modern system, but that's a few houses still have that.
Would that automatically fail?
That would fail, yes. Yep, that would fail. When I do CE classes, we play Jeopardy instead of doing quiz. So that's a clue. So that's basically warning signs, plumbing backing up, sewage, all sorts of odors and things like that. So that's that. Did we talk about different types of systems? I think did we answer the question about different types of systems? Basically, you've got sand mounds,
you've got different types of leach fields and different size tanks for different applications. So load test, we talked about why we do that. The load test, hydraulic load test, they'll bring out a tank of water and fill the system if there's no water available. So ideally it's water available. It adds quite a bit to the cost of that, as you can imagine. And it takes a little bit longer too for.
Doesn't it tax the system like a lot in one, like all at once? It taxes an older system.
It can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that concern, and I've got the answer from the testers. It's like, it just does, there's no way to.
Right.
Yeah, because if you've got a low water level in the tank, you're gonna fill it, and it's gonna flow. Well, that leach field's been dry for a while, maybe.
Yeah.
If it's been vacant for a year or two, which you find that a lot of times, that leach field's gonna be dry, and you're gonna, oh, by the way, if family of 5 moves in, they're gonna have that experience at some point, but it's gonna be after they get moved in and use house for a while, so. We talked about baffles, distance, we actually talked about that, and there's, I think it's 50 feet to the tank, and then another additional to the but it varies by ordinance, by township. We talked about distribution pumps, so. Any questions on any more on septic? So that answers those questions. What about wells? Any questions on wells? Well.
Does Pillar to Post do a sewer lateral like for public water?
Yes.
They do, and you do a camera?
Yes, we do a camera. I've got a couple pictures and slides on that if you care to see them, at some point.
Is that something that then you give, like I know some of the boroughs and townships are requiring, like a, like a video of it, and then you have to like send, I know in Dublin I had one last year where I had to, the only people I knew that could do that and do it in the format that they wanted was roto-rooter.
Yeah, and how much do they
I don't remember how much it was off the top of my head, but I do know that they didn't fill out the form correctly. And the gentleman signed off on it in the pouring rain, and when I took it to the borough, they were arguing about a signature line, and I told the Roto-Rooter I wasn't paying for him to come back out again. Like they had the camera, but they were the only ones that I knew that did it, so you do.
We do. We're probably the first home inspection company in the area that's regulated. And two reasons. One is we were using, we had started offering it because we had agents saying, hey, can you help us find somebody that can do this? Like, oh, yeah, well, we found a guy in Lower Bucks County that was doing a great job.
Okay.
Then he quit doing a great job. And we have a plumber on staff. He's a home inspector, but he's a plumber.
Okay.
So we bought the equipment and started doing it. And it involves a video. We do it at the time of the inspection, if at all possible.
Okay.
If not, we'll go back and do it. And a good video, and then also a written report, format report. And yeah, that train's coming. So
yeah, and that probably is something that if you're representing the buyer, you probably should suggest that they do that. How much does something like that cost?
It's $350.
Yeah, because some of these older townships and boroughs have really old sewer lateral lines, and that can be a little costly, especially if it's,
Cheltenham is headed down that path. Jacob is already there. They just passed an ordinance that you have to have. So yeah.
Okay, well, I know Dublin Borough is because my sellers had to replace their sewer lateral line in August, and it was like $2,000, and they put it on the market in October, and we had to pay again to have, like after they replaced it, we had to then pay for the sewer lateral video and everything, which was like a double bang. It was like they had just done it.
I think this is new, they'll figure it out. Just as a perspective, radon 25 years ago was a minuscule transaction. Now it's 75% of our transactions last year, or of our inspections had a radon. So in St. Louis, Missouri, my counterpart there they do about 3,000 inspections a year. 75% of his inspections have sewer scope. Is that two people do nothing but sewer scope. So it just kind of blossomed in the last 15 years. So it's headed that direction, and I figure, let's get ahead of it. So.
Right.
So, any questions on wells at all before we get started? That's a great idea. I get it. That's good. Start asking that before. We asked that before home inspection. I don't know why I didn't do that before class. So, what questions you got about wells? Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to start. No, I'm sorry. That's a great way to start a meeting. It's like, or class. It's like, what questions you guys got? So, any questions on wells?
Is there an average per gallon per minute that is, what's the average, I guess?
Oh, that's a great question.
You
We don't test that.
You don't
Yeah,
test
that's-
that. Because sometimes you have people that, when they were growing up, they remember their parents having a well, and now they're millennium, and they're a little older, and they don't like the shower pressure.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Road sign for that.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know, I find it,
I can picture that.
I don't know.
Yeah, industrial strength.
And basically wells, you're just testing the water.
Basically just testing the
Yeah.
water, because it's, you can test the water, you can also test the water pressure. There is a test for that.
Okay. But that's extra, that's not the basic well test.
Yeah,
The basic well test is the water.
Right.
Does it measure how much water is in there, how much gallons, how much usage? Question A. And question B, what is the most common thing that you run into as a problem on wells test?
Right. Okay. Great, common issues, we'll got that covered. Anything else on wells? Anybody got a well water system on their house? You do? Okay, but now septic? How about that? So, how's the well work?
Fine, but we refinanced,
Yeah.
and a well person came out and they tested the water, they came out and tested it, and it flunked. It was very low, and I was beside myself, like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And when the guy came out, he didn't take that little thing off, that little filter off. He said if it's tight, can't get it off by hand, we leave it on and let the water come through. So I said, oh man, and a neighbor said, take that off, rinse it, the filter, put it back on, and it'll pass. And I did that, and it passed.
Wait, the guy didn't take the aerator off the
It
faucet?
didn't,
Well, that was
because
the
it was,
problem.
it was
That was
not,
the
it was
first
too,
clue.
it was too tight.
Yeah.
And he said, we will not loosen it, because we're afraid that we're gonna break your spigot.
And then they're
I was
responsible, go get
mad.
somebody else.
So they had to come back.
He should be doing
If you ever have that, just stop the music right there.
Yeah.
Say, listen, save your, don't do
Because
this.
those little pieces are not very expensive if you do
And
crush
because
them.
it interferes in every possible way with the test. You're aerating the water, which is an aerator supposed to do that. You're not getting a clean bowl of the sample. You're just not. It's just, no.
Because she said, oh, it didn't pass, it was very low, but it didn't pass. And then she wanted to charge me the whole thing again, I said, no, give me a discount rate there.
Yeah, so, okay, good, that's not kosher. You know, there's protocol for pulling water samples. We stopped doing it. You got a water testing company that will come out, pull the water, take the sample to their lab, give us a report. And we don't have to mess with having rubber gloves, the guy's doing it. I just, they're doing it right, there's too much science involved. I just want to make sure it's right, and and it only costs just like $20 more for them to come out and pick up the sample. So just have them do it, they're the pros. So, anyway, so this is, basically, you gotta dig down to get to the water table. And sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's difficult, but you basically, the whole dug process, there's 3 types of wells. We're not gonna talk about dug wells because they're a thing of the past. Nobody's hand digging a well anymore. If they are, they should make some phone calls. They should get a computer and go to Google. They should do something different, but don't. And then there's bored wells, which are actually more of a thing of the past. Drilled wells is what we're dealing with most these days. And so dug well basically is for using a machine. This is not rocket science. 2 to 3 inch diameter, so it's a foot diameter, so it's a much bigger hole that they go through the dug wells. That's the only thing I can caution you on that side is if it's an older home, older meaning 75, 100, 150 year or more, there's probably a well on the property. Okay, there's probably a dug well on the property, just like the old, pulling up the water out of the well. It's somewhere. Okay, just keep that in mind. If
there's a seller's disclosure, do you know of a well on the property? The reason I say that is ran across a well underneath the deck once, and I got in through the deck, and little kids were raised, they were moving out of the house, and they built the deck over, and I'm crawling underneath really low, and there's this black hole, and I got to the edge of it, had my flashlight, I took my flashlight, I was like, whoa, it's just still getting shivers. It was like, damn, that's freaky. And these are got little kids moving in the house, so they're somewhere they just decided, well, build the deck over it, close off the deck with some lattice, and nobody will get in there.
Right.
So anyway, that's what Jimmy Hoffa is. So.
Well,
Maybe Jessica.
Yeah. So, but anyway, and then there's a drill well, machine drill. This is what we do now today, 6 inches, hundreds of feet. You can go way the heck down there. So here's a drilled well. You've got a submersible pump. So when you do a well inspection, what can they do? They can't go down to the submersible pump and see what's going on. So you have to go by other factors. One is water pressure, and to answer that question, I don't know if I got this part in here, but you're in a home inspection. If it's a well, we'll turn on copious locations of water, okay, and flush toilets and see what happens to that water pressure. If it drops a lot, then you might have a water pressure issue. But generally speaking, if you open both sinks assuming we have 2 sinks in the master, turn on the shower, maybe start the tub, and flush the toilet, see what happens to the water pressure. If it drops off and the shower stops completely, might have a problem here. And then we'll recommend further evaluation. And a well person will come out and actually run water pressure tests. And we haven't gotten into that yet. It's one of those things where it doesn't happen very often, but it's very rare actually that we find it. So it's one of those things where the inspection is enough. That'll get you through it. So water quality, that's the big thing. So mostly we test now for coliform bacteria, but there's other tests out there that are more in depth. Have you guys heard of all the different, There's all sorts of 3- and 4-letter acronyms of bad stuff for you, and then there's lab, and there's so having all that tested. And some people want to test for radon in the water, which is interesting because makes sense. Radon's a challenge because you breathe it, but radon is radioactive material. So if it's in the water, you've got possibility of ingesting that as well. So had a few people test for radon in water, but not very many. Don't have it too much. And we don't offer it, don't sell it, don't go too far with it. But that's and here's your 100 feet from the septic tank. So church and state separate. We're tested regularly. If I had a well, I'd test once a year for all of the volatiles, and then just do a full battery test, a couple $100 a year. It's worth it, just to know what's going on.
do they not put fertilizers down if they have a well?
It's not a good idea, but
Vinegar,
yeah.
or, like weed killer and stuff, right?
Yeah, I would recommend not. Although the chances of it making it through that ground and into that water, depending on how deep the well is probably not that great. Because your water source is actually coming from an aquifer further down that's fed from other places. So, and hence the challenge. Because we had a house that we inspected that had city water, but also had a well, and it was a disaster of a house. It had been on the market for 2 years. Vacant, all the copper was gone. It was horrible. Just have a bulldozer operator further inspect this house. It just, done. But the people wanted to buy it for a flip or something. And great historic home. Turns out that the well water they had city water. They just replaced it with city water. But the well water was the problem. They had 2 plants, a Stanley Tool plant and some other plant nearby. This was way out in Carlisle. And it turned out that the water was like an Aaron Brockovich case.
Yes.
The buyer's wife went over to the neighbors to ask about it, and both the neighbors came over, and he had on an oxygen mask and was, in really bad shape. and they've been drinking this water for years, and
The groundwater got
the groundwater got, no, so that was from a plant 3 miles away. You know, so that's more of an issue than your local, you know, your aquifer, and putting some fertilizer on your lawn, so, yeah. Probably not a big deal.
That's years and years and years of leaking.
Yeah, it's not a lot of
I
stuff.
used to work for an environmental company.
I had a situation
Thank you.
where
Yes.
literally there was a gas station. And the gas station was there for many years when I
Thank you very much.
never removed the tanks, or had the tanks for a long time, but they were leaking.
Yeah.
It's 23 houses around, all got poisoned by the gas. Couldn't sell it, EPA had to get involved, 2-year situation. My grandmother's house.
I used to work for a gas station
Really?
and clean them up for an environmental company. I used to work for a doctor, wrote a book on groundwater remediation for underground storage tanks for all the Argo gas stations closed down all over the country. So it's your situation, there was 15 people. So
Wow.
that's where our company was contracted to do it.
No kidding. That's, wow. Yeah, we have,
You would think I would know a little bit about it.
yeah, I think you do.
I don't type book.
Thanks. Thanks for coming by, appreciate it.
Thank you.
I had a situation where the electrical took a long time to figure out what was going on. Apparently, lightning had struck an aquifer near our house.
Okay.
And my son came upstairs one day and he said, Mom, he said, I'm getting shocked when I'm brushing my teeth. Right?
Lightning struck an aquifer.
Right. And it turned out that they had to rewire and ground all of the pipes that were affected.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, he was getting shocked.
At least
Isn't that weird? I mean, it took them a
That's-
long time to figure it out.
I guess, I was sick that day in science class. I don't know how that water could hold that electricity. Anybody know? That's good. That- Thank you.
Took them a long time, and they finally figured it out what to do.
That's great.
So, get water in the house, basically, you know, the well-fluxed water. We've got a pump inside the house that's a little more old school, and then you've got a pump at the bottom of the well, which is new school. The old school is fine, works fine. You've got a pump inside the house. The thing we'll look for in a home inspection, and that we can look at, is water pressure on that pump, because a pump will actually, have a storage tank, and all of them will have a storage tank or a pressure tank that will set a pressure for the inside of the house. Because you can have low water pressure with a well, but you can also have high water pressure with a well, and that high water pressure can actually cause pipe issues and actually break pipes. So that's a regulator, that separate system is a regulator that is actually going to regulate that. And then shallow wells, that's really not an issue these days, but the pump can be put inside the house, and it pulls water. Here's an interior pump, so this is what you'll find inside the house. And then outside the house, the deep well, you know, you'll have to basically, you actually pull the pump out of the well and then replace it or repair it and whatever. So, and usually the way you know you've got an issue is your water pressure drops a lot. And it's either the well is going, have you ever had a problem with water pressure or
No.
the well going dry? No? Do you water your lawns from it or anything like that, or, yeah, wow, so you got a good well. How long have you had the house?
3 years.
Okay. Good. Yeah, you're probably in good shape. So, and then here's the internal pump inside the system pump, submersible pump, and pressure tank. That's really key, and I talked about that. But it's really key to have that, because if you don't, you're going to have pressure rate variance all the time, and this will actually set it. We see on that tank, we'll see a pressure of around 30 pounds. I think it's 30 pounds. And we'll just take a look at it. You know, in some cases you'll look at it and see it's, 2 pounds or really low. It'll be interesting. And we'll check the water pressure. But a lot of times around the internal tanks, if there is inside the house, if there's a tank, a pressure tank or a pump, checking for corrosion, typical what you look for in a certain place where there is. And then there's a pressure tank.
But why is it so expensive to tack on a softener system?
Well, That's a good question.
Repeat that question, Greg.
Why is it so expensive?
To tackle and soften.
A softener, water softener to a system. I have no experience with water softeners. We don't inspect them. It's kind of out of our scope. What does it cost to put have the Culligan man come out
I
after
had
you
one
yell
put,
for it?
I had one put in and it was $2,100.
Okay, that doesn't surprise me. I was thinking
How
thousands.
much was it? I couldn't hear you.
2,100?
I thought that was a lot.
But after we moved in, a little while after, because the water softener was getting real low, I looked in there and there was this mold in there. I was like freaking out. So I was too cheap, so we cleaned it ourselves. It was fine.
Yeah. You know what? That's fine. And as long as you got all the mold out and it didn't come back.
No,
And it should be okay. Yeah. So sometimes the easiest fix is best. Yes.
How many gallons a minute does a average house, how many gallons a minute does a house well produce?
I honestly cannot tell you. I wish I could. I don't have a GPM. That's what it should be is I'll get back with you. I will find out the answer to that. Without testing it on a regular basis, I don't know exactly what that should be. So it's a great question. It needs to be put in this presentation. So stay tuned. I've got a well company friend, so I can get that answer really quick. So problems. So here's the problems you have, which I think answers the question. Common issues. Contamination is number one. So whenever you have a well, you want to have a water test, at least for coliform bacteria. That's a pass-fail test. So and then it's an easy fix. You can shock the system and a solution, and it'll actually put a chlorine solution and it'll put it back in whack. So it's not hard to fix, but it's important to know that you've got a coliform bacteria issue as well. Obviously you can't supply enough water. That's going to be visual from a pressure standpoint. Now, some people's idea of water pressure is different than others. So, and that's something during an inspection, hopefully your inspector is going to talk that through with your client and say, well, okay, so here's what we got going. Here's the water pressure in the house. Just so that the client has a feel for what that looks like. Pump fails, well runs dry, other stuff. But from an inspection standpoint, long term, it's not like septic. Really, the only thing I'd want to do is every year have, and that's me personally, is have the contamination test done. Just because there's so much going on with our water supply everywhere these days.
In reference to that contamination, and this goes back a long time ago, I haven't heard of 650, was blue lights in there?
Yeah.
What did that do?
Well, there's it's a blue light. It's a won't come to me, but there's a lighting system that actually the
It's
water.
like ultraviolet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ultraviolet. Wouldn't pop in my head. I hate that when that happens. Ultraviolet light actually system, that UV light system that'll actually purify and take out impurities out of the water. So those are an additional measure.
Question for you. This is a good one for the class too. I ran into this one and I probably did it completely wrong, so I'm going to ask. We had a situation where somebody was buying a raw piece of land. I'm talking about land earlier, okay? A raw piece of land, and they were going to rebuild a house on it. So there was an old existing structure. It was abandoned for about 20 years. It was falling apart. They were going to wreck it down or smash it down and then rebuild a new home. But it had to be well and septic. But what existed up there already was an old well and septic system. Is it better to test the old well and septic system, remove the well and septic system, or how does that work? Because my problem came down to the end. They were selling this piece of land as is, okay? So for me to have somebody come in and do a test, which was gonna cost X amount of dollars for both well and septic, and then if it failed, which it probably would after 20 years, I would assume, then basically the seller was saying as is, it is what it is. So I was really vacillating, I guess you would say, between do I go out there and get it tested, and then if it got tested and it's okay, is it good to go? Do I rip it up, Any background on that one? That was one of my hardest deals I've done. I did that one about 5 years ago.
What did you do? I'm just curious.
Well, I'm gonna let him answer so I look cool. Whatever he says, I did now. But what would you have done? Seriously, in reality, I know the direction I told my clients to kind of spin away from the property because there was too many unknowns, and I'm just a very much black and white, getting things done. And I didn't want to do it. This customer was coming out of the military and, you know, coming 300 miles to come to this place.
Right.
So we moved on to a different property. But if, in a perfect world, how would I have handled that? With you?
Was it a big piece of ground?
It was about 1.5 acres of land. And the hardest part was trying to find a damn well and septic thing because nobody knew where it was. So we were joking around that we were going to go out there with that old piece of wood that's like a Y and whatever that's called, you know what I mean?
Dividing rod, yeah.
Yeah.
And they do, they actually do, they actually use those still.
Yeah.
They still use those, there's people that, you know.
Yeah, but like in the situation like that, that's like a 400 level hard one. Like, what would I or should I have done as an agent?
Okay, so how long had it been since the house was vacant?
20 years. 22 years to be precise.
No,
And it was like collapsing, like literally.
Starting fresh. I would say, listen, just budget for new well, new septic. I wouldn't even consider the system.
You wouldn't even test it or anything?
That's $500-700, probably, well, more than that, probably $1,000.
Yeah, I was coming in about $1,300 because they had to find
hydraulic.
it, and then they had to bring up. They were telling me like actual pieces of equipment.
Unless they were in love with, there was something special there. But if they're scraping together the money to put the deal together already, and it's going to $1,500 is going to cut into their money to put the deal together. Personally, I'd be like, hey, move on. No, that's not my fault. I mean, but
to rip up well and septic, that would have been pretty costly.
that adds to the cost. Yeah, to take it up. The well, not so much, but they'd have to drill a new well because the well was probably not current technology. Because if the house was vacant 20 years, the well probably was put in at least 40 years ago. I mean, it was a house obviously in decline the years before it was vacated, and then I'd be like, let's
just
move
start
this
fresh.
to another. I'd start fresh and put in a new well septic. So the septic could be actually doesn't necessarily have to be taken out. It can be sealed and an entire new system. It sounds like you're going to relocate the house anyway. With 3 acres or acre and
They
a
had a
half.
building envelope they could have worked with already that was predetermined, so they probably would have
Stayed on the same spot. But you could move things around and you know, but that's a long one. Depends, of course, there's a lot of variables. How much is the property, you know?
like 1.2 mil.
Well, there you go. That's another thing. So wow, just for starters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could they subdivide it and put on lots of houses?
No, they're just going to build.
Anyway,
She was an artist. She was an artist.
Wow. Must have been a very successful artist.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was her art? What was her medium?
Cubism.
Oh.
Which Maggie probably is the only one who knows what it is.
I
Like Picasso, a whole bunch
I
of
do.
dots
I
to
do.
make a picture. There you go. You know.
That's the thing for me. So interesting. Wow. You don't see too many cubism folks.
Yeah.
Pretty. So if the water smells funny, you know, and we have people say it smells funny, it's got a sulfury smell to it or whatever, and that's basically the from the aquifer from the well, you're going to have some and have it tested. In every case, have it tested.
I have a question.
Yes.
What if you have city water and sewer, and you smell like a sewery smell sometimes from, like, say, your bathroom sink?
Yeah, it happens, and that's.
The trap?
No, it would hopefully not a trap. If you're smelling it from the water itself, smells when you're running the water, or the.
I'm not sure if it's coming from the spigot or if it's all of a sudden I'm smelling it as the water's going down the drain.
You might have a trap issue. Is the drain slow? No. Sometimes sometimes I would think it would be a trap issue. Because your water shouldn't smell like that, city water. You occasionally run into, and we ran into this in some places like New Jersey, and they had, I got all sorts of interesting stuff going on over there. And they said that there were issues with the water, but they weren't life-threatening, and we fixed it. And, you know, you'll have quality water in the summertime, you'll have quality, it'll be, yeah. So city water has become less and less reliable these days, we all hear about that. So, but as far as the smell from a trap, or from a drain, it's gonna be a trap issue. That you're getting, somehow you're getting some, a little bit, maybe, of water, of sewer gas backed up into the system. So if there's rooms that you don't use very often or never use, but they have a sink in them, run the water once in a while, just to fill up that localized trap. New homes don't have a whole house trap, so this is something, the old houses will have a whole house trap. So before the line goes out to the street or to the main sewer line, there will be a trap there that's one last stoppage of having any sewer gases coming in, which you don't want from the street. But some newer construction doesn't have a whole house trap, generally speaking. And so that because they rely on the local traps underneath the sinks and so on. So, because they're fine. But if a local trap runs dry and you got a mother-in-law room or whatever room and nobody's ever there, and it could, you know, at that location could smell fun.
I have one more quick
Oh,
question.
yeah.
There was a farm property that I was looking at with a client, and there was an environmental site not too far, about 3 miles away, that had been identified and they were cleaning it up. They wanted to put an offer in and have the water tested, but the attorney would not let them test the water. And I said, well, because if it came back and they walked away, then they had to disclose it, right? So could that travel that far, 3 miles away?
Yeah, the one in Harleysville, I think was
Oh, the people.
3 or 4 miles away.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah.
Yeah, the attorney wouldn't let them, wouldn't let us test the water.
Yeah, wow.
He knew.
Yeah. It's interesting that
It's old, the people living there now.
the aquifers, I mean, the size of some, you know, you've got some local wells that you dig down and they're small and they're fed by underground springs or whatever, but they're small. And then there's aquifers, I know there's an aquifer, I live in Memphis, Tennessee, that runs from Nashville, east and west to Little Rock, which is a long damn way, as they say down south. And it's literally, it's a fantastic aquifer, by the way, it's awesome water. But it's amazing, the agriculture that happens all around there, and that aquifer is in pristine condition, but it's really deep and vast, and it runs up in the Mississippi River, it's way deep. So it's an interesting one, so you get different, you know, but if the spring was feeding from underneath that plant, yeah, if somebody says you can't test that because it's a disclosure issue, you know, I mean, I don't suggest anything to anybody, I'm just an inspector, but.
It was interesting that
It's like game over. So that's all that dry summer, we talked about that a little bit, pump failure, mechanical system. I mean, there's gonna be certain things, because it's a mechanical system. If it's been vacant, if the house has been vacant for quite some time, that's gonna be a concern, because a pump that doesn't have any movement on it, you know, body in motion stays in motion. A pump in motion stays in motion, it's gonna be okay. But buy a 2-year-old car or a 4-year-old car that's at Granny's garage for that long. All the rubber gaskets, all the rubber seals, all the tires, anything that's rubber is toast, because it's gotten brittle and dried out, because rubber needs to move and to stay fresh and active. And there's a lot of rubber parts in this that are relying on staying active. So anything that's been vacant for 2 or 3 years, even a year, there's going to be issues. That's why you spring leaks. You know, they have the house winterized. You turn the water on, you've got a chance of having a lot of leaks. So thanks for coming. Thank you. Good to see you again. That's why you want to make sure when you turn the water on at that house that somebody's there. Don't just have them come out and just turn it on and be inside the house, because you never know where the leaks will spring, or what the copper somebody busted into the house and took out. And that happened. They turned it out at the street, and nobody went in the house. All the copper in the basement was gone. It's just filled the basement with water. So, leakage, water clog, a few other things, short cycle. Short cycle is basically just a repair of a pump. Pressure switch, a few other and these are all mechanical systems that can be adjusted and fixed. So, any other questions? I think the only thing I owe you guys is a GPH, gallons per hour or gallons per minute, depending on what the measurement is. So I'll find that out. Talked about usage. I don't remember the question then.
What's the typical amount of?
Gallons per minute.
Okay.
Yeah, so that kind of relates to GPH. And then common usage, we talked about that, so.
Let's go to propane and make our list, shall we?
All right, propane it is.
Yeah, what question do you have on propane?
$500.
Anything?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Bath beach.
Jim? Anything on propane? What else? Anybody else for
Is
propane?
it dangerous, that tank, like,
Exploding.
yeah.
Boom! Yeah.
Okay.
Is it a good idea to bury it, because they don't like the way it looks?
Actually, I got a slide on that. Yeah, that's good. So buried tank, buried versus above ground.
I did an open house yesterday with a giant tank to the side of the house, and people thought that that was the main gas for the house. It turns out it was for the automatic generator, which was nice.
Nice, that's really nice.
Cost. And the contract that you get locked into, AK Bedminster Square. Right?
Yeah. So the cost difference. Cost difference meaning cost difference between natural gas and propane, or
Yeah,
oil
just in
and
general.
propane?
In other words, our biggest problem is propane. People go, what the heck is it? How much does it cost? How effective it is? In other words, what do we run into? But what you can kind of go with propane.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. That's gonna be there's.
And a great example is propane, well and septic. Here's a little thing for you. New home construction, unless it's a very, very small community up rent, we call it death sentence. We will not do a community that has well, septic, or propane under it unless it's an extreme situation.
Really?
Yeah.
$100,000.
Yeah, well, septic, and propane.
They have all three.
Well,
If they have all three, you don't do it.
we try to avoid all three of them.
Was it common to have all three?
It depends on the area that you're at.
I live in.
Like Toll Brothers
In Bucks
really
County.
specializes in it, a little bit more in the
I have
north,
all
but we
three.
try to avoid it.
Like renting from a family member, it's.
Yeah.
Land of village.
We as KW try to.
No.
No, home
We
builders,
as business.
sorry.
Oh, builders, okay.
So what is your thought process on owning the tank? Because I know what I've been told
Good question.
versus renting it.
Dave,
I don't know, I would think I would never want to own it.
I would like to hear at some point the information on Bedminster Square.
Sure, that's what we're gonna talk about. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was probably my worst propane situation.
I want to hear about it. I want to hear your.
Well, that's because they share, right?
Yeah, well, I'll hit that right away. When I was with Pulte, I was the manager of that community. And what it was, Bedminster was a great community. It was rolling, it was on fire. And what happened is we had to sign, every single person who bought had to sign a 3-year agreement with a place called Liberty Propane. I still remember the name of that company.
And they're not there anymore.
Probably not. I mean, this was like 10 years ago. And basically what ended up happening is it started as a fixed cost. But after that first year, it flew up, kind of like an HOA tripling type of mentality.
Oh, wow.
And the people all wanted to get out of it, this this propane company. And
Buy
nobody
the
could.
tank
And you had to buy the tank.
If you were getting out of it, right?
Yeah, if you were getting out of it, you could buy it, you had to
Yes.
but you were locked in this long-term contract. And it was like, became anti-propane hysteria up there for the longest time. And people were actually protesting it, writing to the letter, and putting on our Facebook page back in the day. And it became this nightmare where Bedminster went from arguably, I think it was my most successful community in Pennsylvania at one point on sales volume, to just dying. And the last 10 homes took frickin' forever to sell in that community.
Wow.
I remember that.
Yeah, that was
But
my
that's when
biggest
propane
nightmare.
had gone up, propane had gone sky high.
Right, but it was like, they were starting off as X
Yes,
amount
I
per
know.
cubic yard
Yes.
or whatever it was. It almost tripled
Yes.
in that second year, and all these people
And they
were
were
thinking
locked
they
in,
were gonna
yeah.
spend X amount, and now it was tripling,
Yeah.
and they were blaming us on it,
Yeah.
Pulte Homes, But it wasn't us, it was just we signed it up with Liberty, with this company. And this company just, probably because propane had nothing to do with Liberty, and it just flew through the roof, and people were freaking out. And today, to this day, you hear people in Bedminster, it's the first thing that jumps to so many people's minds. But it's a damn nice community.
Why would propane?
Because there's no natural gas.
There was no natural gas.
natural
In other words,
gas
we
out
call it the death sentence. We try to avoid these communities like the back of our hand, but we have no choice sometimes. We can't put in the infrastructure because we bought what's called improved lots.
Especially up there.
Are there a lot
Right.
of houses?
Well, electric wasn't cost efficient.
Hold on.
Would have made more sense.
The old fashioned way.
It was just kind of tied in, I guess you would say, at the end of the day.
Is there still a problem?
You could go with heat pumps, but we, as home builders, we just said, here it is, end of the story, moving on type of deal. Yeah, we weren't dealing with heat pumps, we were just cookie cutter building, man.
No, the problem is you have to educate them, the problem is they're not educated on
Yeah.
it. That's the problem.
Yeah,
They
and
come
the
to
people
open
that were
houses, they
coming
wanna
from
know-
Bedminster,
Yeah.
they were not coming from, the Poconos and Jim
Yes.
Thorpe and Allentown
Yes.
down. What they were is the buyer profile there were the people who wanted to live in Bucks County, like where we are, but couldn't afford it the same exact price, so they went up to there, and now 90% of our buyer profile was pretty much down here. In fact, we used to call it a precursor to Carriage Hill, one of our other communities. And basically, we just extracted people from there. And Bedminster, when it was built, there really wasn't many other existing big home communities at that
But are
time.
the utilities,
Features.
is the gas utilities still expensive in there?
No, I mean, it's the cost of propane, and you can, the
So-
problem is if you own the tank or you don't own the tank.
Yep.
If you own the tank, you can shop around and go to Blue Flame or Agway or whatever and buy when it's low in the summer. But if you don't own the tank, you're at liberty to fill up when they come out with their
With Liberty.
their truck,
With
tank,
Liberty.
with Liberty, and they connect in and then charge you $500 and some 2 days before Christmas. Like, that's the extent of it. It's whether or not you wanna own the tank or you don't wanna own the tank and what that means, cause it's buried underground. And I don't know.
Costly to own the tank?
Well, you buy it outright.
Yeah.
It's like, it could be, $1,500 to $2,500 to buy the tank outright.
I think it was even more expensive than that.
And,
That
And
sounds
then-
like it's smarter.
well, then
Long
what
term,
happens,
if
what
you
happens
have
if the borough comes in or the township comes in and says, I don't know, they need to be painted or there needs to be X, Y, and Z, then you're digging it up, and that's your responsibility.
But if it's not out, it's
Correct.
Exactly.
So it's
There's your background of Bedminster, and that's why it's relevant, because Bedminster is a community that we deal with a lot here in this office, and it's gonna come up, but it's good to know.
Yeah, that is good to know. And I would say, so just as kind of an overall thing, when, home inspection, by the standards of practice, propane systems are excluded from our standards of practice. We can't even comment on it. So when you ask me about it, it's like, I gotta learn more about this. I knew some, obviously, but I wanted to learn more, so I did some digging and learned some more. So I've heard enough stories about propane that are like, wow, take long to figure out that it can be a challenge. But it's definitely, rent versus buy is the biggest question I found that I hear. And always during inspection, the question is so who owns the propane tank? You know what, you need to check the seller's disclosure, check the seller, see who owns it. If they own it, then, and actually I've got some slides on this, kind of walk through, and they're just very simple ones. Who owns the tank? So if the homeowner owns it, one of the things you want to do, and I can't remember how I ordered these slides. So own to rent. I'll back up to each one of these, but own to rent. Basically, get the documentation. It's kind of like anything. Make sure that the documentation is there, because you want to have the facts for your buyer.
Right.
And you want to be able to get all the facts, and if they're readily available, should be. If they can't tell you when it was installed, when it was serviced, when the last time that, whatever. Okay, and you own it? Yes, we own it. Okay. Those tanks do have a lifespan, and
Well, I know some of the gauges on the top and the valves go.
yes.
And if you own it, then it's your responsibility, and if it's broken and the gas has just been escaping, then there's no recourse. But if you don't own the tank and the valve's broken and you're going through gas, you can then call the gas company and say, I think last year I only filled it X amount of times, this year I filled it twice. Then they come out and do their little test and
Right.
they then
Yeah.
credit you back.
Yeah.
So that's just one thing.
Yeah, exactly, and so, go ahead, no, go
I
ahead.
didn't interrupt.
No.
I was just gonna say, if there's a gas leak, like you, is
Right.
it the same kind of gas leak with like a pipe type gas that could explode?
You smell, it's like a sweet smell.
It's a sweet smell, they put in it doesn't smell at all
Yeah.
naturally, but they put in same with natural gas, they put in
But I have a propane tank and I live, I don't live in Bedminster, I live in Dublin, but my gas, we were going through gas and my gas company came out several times on like an emergency call and they kept saying there's nothing wrong. But my husband and I were convinced that there was something wrong, so he did like the bubble test and it immediately bubbled and we called them and they came back out and lo and behold, yeah, the valve was shot and we had like a whole tank's worth of gas credited back to us.
Good.
But, I don't remember what which one was, but I know that some of the homes up there, and I know that some of the contractors, specifically Suburban Propane, they will actually come out the day of settlement to the new buyer and explain everything and show them everything and tell them where all the shut-off valves are and walk them through the whole process, which I find to be invaluable.
Yes, you really need that, you really.
And it's no charge.
That's why
There's
renting
no
to
charge
me
to the client.
is, it's just the way to go.
Yeah.
And you're gonna be able to, most likely when you rent, from what I understand, get some kind of, calculation on what your rate's gonna be.
Right.
So that it's on an overage over a market, and so it'll fluctuate, but at least you know that you're tied into an overage. They're not gonna say, well, it's forever gonna cost you this much, but they can tell you that it's gonna cost you this much over whatever the standard is. So it's way better to have, I think if I was my house, or I was buying, I'd wanna rent a big tank. For all the right reasons that you're talking about.
People are very afraid of flammability.
Yeah, it's flammable, and actually it's a really good system, and everything that I understand about propane is it's safer than natural gas in some cases, or in most cases. So it's that, but the very tank, some people, one thing I heard about was that we're building a fire on top of where the tank was. Brilliant. But those are few, and it has to get to an extremely high temperature, higher than you would think before it's going to actually explode. But still, renting the tank, you're going to get it serviced, and that the thing with ownership is who's going to have their tank serviced? It's like scoping the sewer line.
Yeah, you don't have your propane tank at your gas grill serviced.
Yeah.
You get flagged when you go to fill it up by whomever it is that's filling it up for you and say, oh, guess what? So you know they're not checking the underground tank.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a small SUV and I had a tank actually for my grill, and I had it filled, and I put it in the car and started driving on the road. It's like, that smells bad, something's going on here. The tank had a leak.
Yeah.
I just took I took it out and put it on the side of the road,
Right.
and just
Well, I
left it
know
there
we
until
just
it
filled
ran
it
out.
and Agway said they're not gonna fill it again, like the paint was chipping and.
Thankfully, I didn't light up a cigarette or anything. Not that I smoke, but
Right.
can you imagine? That'd make the news. The car just vanished. I don't know where it went. So there's this big boom. So yeah, there's tank sizes or something, you've got all manner of, and it depends on what you're using it for. If it's a whole house, then it's gonna be 500,000 gallon tank. If it's gonna be just for the stove, which you see that a lot, people are like, you know what, I got oil, but I can't cook on the electric. I gotta cook on it, and actually I can't. I have to. So if I had oil, I would have a propane tank for my gas cooking, because it's just that's what people want. But and during an inspection, we will look for, okay, what's this propane servicing? And we'll, you gotta try to walk people through, well, where's it going, where are the lines? One thing we do mention that should be mentioned is if the above ground tank and the line is actually, example is where the line came down the side of the tank, but about halfway down, it started to angle across a walkway that you had to step over every time you walked down this walkway. Granted, it was way on the side of the house, nobody probably ever steps over it, but it's in the way, and it has a potential for it being cut or broken or whatever. So, I made a mention of it in the report that it should have, and it turns out that that was a homeowner tank that Harry the homeowner put in. So, installation is, so if you have a homeowner tank, who put that in? Just get a permit, just all good things to ask. And I don't know if you need a permit, but some towns you probably, did you need a permit to put in all the propane tanking or tanks and piping?
It should be in the construction, but I said, don't remember.
Yeah, I'm sure you would. So guys, I think that's it on propane. Any other questions on it? I will find out. The cost differences, that is a murky subject.
Yeah.
Depends on comparison to what, the company, rental, buying. You get a surcharge if you're renting.
I think it's very comparable to natural gas. I don't find it to be.
So it just goes up and down,
But
just
since
like any
natural gas
commodity.
goes up and
Exactly, it probably depends on which one's the lower one at the time, or,
Yeah.
it's as simple as that.
Exactly.
These tanks rust,
Yes.
is there any special paint that's on them?
Yeah, there's obviously a rust prohibitive paint on it, but they have buried tanks as well, and buried tanks are actually,
Because I have a painting business, and we have a customer that wants us to paint it. And I'm just a little bit leery, because they don't like the color white, they want it blue to match the house.
I'd stay away from that.
So I'm thinking I don't want to do it.
yeah, I think there might be something that says they have to be white. You want to get, I would.
And if the tanks aren't full, and you have an empty tank, and it's raining as much as we've had, they can come up out of the ground. They just
That's a good point.
appear.
That's a good point. I never thought about that. That's a good one.
Yeah. And if the tank is almost empty, it backs up into the house too, that odor, where you think it
Yeah.
smells like,
And they do pressure tests on the lines. I know in some communities, they're actually they pressure test natural gas lines in houses, which is a way to check for leaks in a house.
Right.
So I don't know if they do that with yours, if that's on propane.
no, they don't come into the house, normally it's all done outside of the,
So someone has a propane tank, but let's say the power goes out for 3 days. How is that connected into the power? If the power goes out, and then you still have it.
Still works.
It
Yeah,
still
the
works.
pressure of the gas, just like natural gas.
You
the pressure of the
manually have
gas.
to light it, you flip the valve on, but you manually have to ignite it.
Okay.
So if you have
don't
a-
have heat, you
Yeah.
just don't have lights.
As long as if you have a forced air system,
Uh-huh.
or, well, actually, any new water systems, they're not gonna work without electric, so even if
So you could have like cooking,
you could have cooking,
and you could potentially have a fireplace, I think.
fireplace.
But you don't
You
traditionally
definitely
have
wanna be able
heat,
to vent,
Oh, okay.
dryer, or
Oh,
anything
that's,
like that.
okay.
definitely wanna be able to vent anything,
Yeah.
so if you're, don't just open the oven door and turn on the heat.
Any other questions? Okay, so basically, so again, at the end of the day, what do we really get out of this? You heard me say this a million times, I'm gonna say it again. We sell the sizzle and not the steak, okay? We don't need to know every single thing that's on here. But at the same time, that's why we have Greg to reach out to. But imagine if we are going to see some of the homes up in the northern parts of this area, or really anything around here. What's gonna happen is if I was going to show propane and I had well and septic, honestly, even after 19 years, I'm not an expert at this in any way, shape, or form. I'd actually review these slides before I go up there. Because the point is that you could say something like, hey, propane, what do you know about it? A little bit of this, a little bit of that. Well, you know what, it depends if you own it, it depends if you rent it. It's a whole bunch of different things that we could talk about in time. But what do you know about propane? That was my number one question. And then at the same time, if you know 2 or 3 things about well and septic, 2 or 3 things about propane, you start coming off as a consultant. Actually, now you sound like you know what you're talking about. 2 or 3 things, that's all it takes at the end of the day. But really, again, if they start saying, well, on the propane, how does it work on a pure cubic square inch, type, I don't know, let's call Greg. And we turn it over to the chef, okay? But that's definitely something great. The other thing is the slides. I'll talk to Greg just to make sure that he's okay with this, but as usual, I always send out all the slides when we're done. That's why I keep all these classes. you're okay with that, I'd love to share the class. Thank you, appreciate that. We'll send out the slides to everybody. And most important out of everything else, thanks to Greg. Great job. Greg, anything you want to say or pass out your cards?
No, pass out some cards, guys, and really, I mean, and lady left here, but if you guys have any questions at all, as you're out there doing your work, you've got a professional in the family, so I don't know if you'll be calling me, but that's okay. You can always call. And, you know, call if you have any questions, or if you see something out there that's like, what the? Take a picture and text it to me. And it's simple. And then I'll take a look at it. I can give you some at least advice on that picture. You know, so for whatever there is, or if you have issues or questions with home inspections, even if you have one as a seller, you have somebody do one, and you're like, can I get this? I have a couple of realtors that are always all the time. They do a lot of listings, and they'll call me up and say, check this report out. And you know, they won't show me the whole thing, but they'll show me the page or the issue. And it's like, wow, how about that? Well, how should I handle this? Like, well, here's what I do. And I kind of consult on the backside of it and just help them out. Because it's you know, sometimes you just don't know, hey, you don't have to know everything, but if you know somebody, you know, wisdom is knowing when to get other people involved. So,
How much are your home inspections?
they range